How are you, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the Virtual Memories Show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, meh. Not quarantine or COVID depression or anything, but I woke up from a bad dream pretty early this morning that my dog was sick, and well, that just left me pretty unsettled, and I just decided I'd start the day then and there rather than try and get back to sleep, screw up my whole schedule, beat myself up over more stuff. So the upside was I got to take a little stroll around my yard around 4:30 in the morning, which turns out is before the birds wake up. So usually I'm out around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I can hear their morning songs. This time around, it was just the trucks off in the distance, the cicadas doing their low grumbling chorus, and me. So here we are. Let's get to today's show, because you don't need to hear any more about my depressing morning. Audrey Niffenegger is joining us from Chicago. Audrey's best known for her novel, The Time Traveler's Wife, but she's done a lot of other work over the years in writing, art, comics, bookmaking, and more. She's working on the sequel to The Time Traveler's Wife, which is a recurring topic in the conversation today. I recorded with her and her husband, the great cartoonist Eddie Campbell, last Saturday. And even though I talk with Eddie first and refer to that conversation in this one, I'm arbitrarily running Audrey's episode today and Eddie's tomorrow. You can deal. I decided I needed to get them on, A, because we actually get along pretty well since we recorded. B, Audrey posted on Twitter last week that she and Eddie had just adopted a pair of 2-month-old kittens. So I thought it was important to make sure we record now before the situation, gets any worse. As far as caveats go, Audrey is using her computer's internal mic, but that's about it. Here's me and Audrey. So, how are you dealing? How is quarantine life? Yeah.
Well, we're doing all these things, and then about 10 seconds after we do them, they turn out to be major trends, like banana bread or kittens or, writing one's novel while quarantined. Yeah, so I'm doing all of those things, and I'm proud to say that I was doing all of them before millions of other people started. I like to think of myself as a sort of silent trendsetter. Nobody knows I'm doing them, but they instinctively follow.
Yeah, you're just sending emanations out to the ether. That's getting everybody on board. So,
I think somebody out there saw me buy bananas and they thought, oh. Anyway.
Oh, I've gotten it. Nice. As long as you're not the sourdough starter, the person who got that whole trend going. I think that's pretty good.
I tried that a few years ago and it didn't work.
Yeah. Oh,
anyway.
Supposedly, at least in Brooklyn, New York, et cetera, that's become the thing. But I stay away from, a renewable source of food, I guess. It just seems a little weird to me. But tell me about the new cats, the rationale for new cats. Tom tomorrow, as I mentioned in an email, Dan Perkins, got a new cat, but he lives solo. And the cat helps offset the one person in an apartment thing. You're stuck with Eddie. What led to the decision to get 2 more cats?
Well, we previously had 2 cats. They were brilliant. We were well adapted to each other. And then one of them, Whimsy, got brain tumors a couple of years ago, and he died. And then Claudine had, everything under the sun. She had kidney disease and thyroid disease and every other kind of thing. And so for the last 2 years, we've been a little cat hospice, and Claudine died back in April, and the house was sort of lovely and peaceful and quiet and ridiculously empty, and I just couldn't stand it. So every time we would be sitting happily together, I would just look up at Eddie and say, kittens, and he would look at me like, oh, please no. So anyway, he finally acquiesced. We have kittens.
Nice. Yeah, that was the longest since restarting as a pet owner. It was 3 months that we were dogless. It was at the 2-month mark that I was recording with Patrick McDonnell, the cartoonist who does Mutts.
Yeah.
And I asked him, because he had a long-term dog who died, and then it was how soon did you replace it? What do you do? And he admitted he waited way too long. And the day they got the new dog, it was, why did I wait for a year and a half? That's the stupidest thing in the world. So he realized, when it feels right, do that. So we had 2 months of the house being pretty quiet, and then a giant Gyllenfing greyhound a month later. And that, he is the world's laziest greyhound, which I always put a little trademark next to whenever I write about him. But yeah, it's good to have a non-human life in the house to, either mellow you out or at least get you thinking along different lines, or just someone who is absolutely dependent on you and that you feel like, you have some modicum of control, I guess, in your life.
These kittens are only 2 months old. Yeah, the new book. Yeah.
Oh, no, the kittens being 2 months old is also kind of freaky. You're going really long term with that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was thinking more like, oh, yeah, let's get some kittens that are more like 6 months old, which is more in my comfort zone. But these guys are both tiny and maniacal, and they like to throw each other off of tables and land with a thud. And I don't know. We try to stop them from doing these things, but they really want to. Meanwhile, I'm trying to sit quietly and finish a book. And so,
is this the book you were trying to finish when last we spoke? Which I don't know if it's okay to mention by name.
Yeah.
My world is a non-disclosure agreement, so I don't want to screw up any.
Oh no! I've been going on and on about this book for how long have I been writing this? I started in 2012, and still going at it. I looked at my word count the other day, which I don't do all that often, and God, I can't remember what it was, but I remember I had 437 pages. I mean, the thing has been as long as a novel for quite some time. I just keep removing hunks of it and putting in different hunks and staring at sentences and trying to get it all to cohere. So someday it will be about this long, but the words will be different and they'll be in a slightly different order.
It's just weird because my conversation with Eddie involved a much shorter term project that he's also continually going in, pulling things and having to rearrange, except in his case, there's the word and illustration dynamic. But he sounds like he's put himself into a book that he can never finish because he always wants to tweak one thing and that involves 10,000 strands that have to be fixed after that. So you guys are made for each other. So.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, in truth, I think quite a lot of artists and writers are like that. If you don't come and pry it away from us, it will never be published. I mean, his book, The Goat Getters, even after it was published and looking beautiful and bound and in bookshops, he was still rewriting it.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I used to publish Small Press once upon a time, and I published Samuel Delaney. And Chip, his nickname, and I was working a full-time day job at this business-to-business magazine. He would call every day with edits and corrections to the chapbook that we were doing as a giveaway for people who bought the collection of letters that we'd actually published as a book. But I also had to version every single one of them because they were all going to be part of his papers up at the Mugar Library in Boston. And it drove me kind of insane after a while. But there are certain writers I know who are particularly. One more thing. I just need to change this here, and here.
Yeah.
So
well, do you know the story of the publishing of Ulysses?
I don't know which story. Tell me the story.
Yeah, so you know how Sylvia Beach published it for James Joyce because nobody else would touch it and everybody else was, all the English printers were afraid to have anything to do with it because the printers themselves could be sued for obscenity.
Yeah.
So there she was in Paris, graciously publishing this amazing thing for her good friend James Joyce. And of course, it was being set in lead type because this is back in the day when that's how we did it. So one of the most expensive things that you could do is make changes after the thing was in galleys, because back then you had actual metal galley trays and they would be full of type, and you would get proofs off of these long galley trays full of type. And so James Joyce was, because Sylvia Beach was very inexperienced and didn't know any better and maybe couldn't say no, he rewrote something like a third of Ulysses off the galleys. So no real publisher would have ever let him do that, but because of Sylvia Beach's indulgence or inexperience, we have the Ulysses that we have today. But if you look at, the British Museum has this, if you look at these corrected galleys, I mean, James Joyce is practically blind, and so he was crossing things out in this big crude orange crayon and rewriting very sloppily and largely in the margins. So it looks like some sort of lunatic kindergartner went at it with crayon, you know?
And in a certain sense, that holds up. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I had that with Delaney. He apparently, with his best known book, Dahlgren, he would go into bookstores with stacks of cards of corrections and just slide those into every copy of the book he found, just so whoever bought it would have Chip's latest round of corrections on these pages. And it was just,
that's charming.
I didn't know what I was getting into, but you know, it's you know, again, writers, you're a superstitious and cowardly lot or something like that. But yeah, it can just, you know, it can keep running away from you, I guess. But how was the transition into the whole quarantine and lockdown mode for you? I mean, I know it's a lot of writers tell me I was already working at home, didn't have to change much, but what was it like for you, that transition 2.5 months ago when this all started to go sideways?
Well, I actually do like to leave the house, and I'm chagrined that I can't much anymore, and that if I did, a lot of my favorite things are currently closed. Eddie is much more of a homebody, but the biggest difference for us is that our assistant, Ken Gerleave, does not come over. We completely communicate by phone and by email. And our wonderful housekeeper, Sharon Britton Dittmer, also doesn't come over. So we are descending into stickiness and crumbliness.
Yeah.
And so we're in our jammies later, we're sloppier, and we have kittens. And by the time the two of them come back again, they'll be very ashamed of us. We're perfectly happy, you know, in that we're healthy. Almost everybody we know is healthy. All the people I know of who have gotten COVID-19, people's grandmothers, and one of my former students had it. But so far, my immediate circle of friends and relatives are okay. But it feels weird, you know, we're sitting here sort of it really does feel like the eye of the storm, while around us there's tremendous loss and grief and political stupidity. And so it's a weird, it's one of those strange things, you know, like when you know there's been some horrible disaster elsewhere in the world, you know, a tsunami or you know, 3 Mile Island or something. And, you know, so you know that like Chernobyl's going on, but you look outside and everything looks beautiful and sunny. And so that's kind of what it's like here.
Yeah. I'm 25 miles away from New York, and even during the heaviest period of this, we were still, New Jersey is also a disaster, but where I live was still pretty mild in terms of impact. I didn't go out, and I still, I don't think I've set foot in another building besides my house for about 7 or 8 weeks, which will probably cause a psychotic breakdown when I finally do. My wife has volunteered to do the grocery shopping solo because there's no point in double exposing us to more risk. But yeah, it's one of those things where the immediate world around me hasn't changed, but I recognize that, you know, if you just go over the border into the next county, you start to hit the hot zone, basically. So yeah, I'd wondered, with Chicago being as affected as it's been, and Illinois in general, whether you guys have seen an impact or, again, if you're still shielded by just the virtue of being able to stay at home.
Well, the thing in Chicago, like so many things, is that the impact of this is being dealt out rather unequally.
Sure.
So people who are poor or, minorities, people without access to more space or people who don't have to take the CTA seem to be getting the sharp, pointy end of this much more than us. It's affecting the south and west sides a lot more than the north side, which is where we are. So I kind of look around and I think, boy, there's an illustration of privilege if there ever was one.
Sure. Yeah, we've got the that sense of being protected. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's funny because the book I'm writing is a sequel to The Time Traveler's Wife. It's called The Other Husband, and what's really odd for me is that because it's about time travel, because it's about Alba de Tamble, who is Henry and Claire de Tamble's daughter. So Alba was born in the first book 6 days before 9/11, and there's a chapter where Henry is watching the towers fall and holding Alba, and he knows this is going to happen. So in the book I'm writing, there's a lot of stuff about climate change, and when the pandemic came along, I thought, oh yeah, okay, because I knew that it would have to get into this book, even though it's a bit late now to slot in anything so major. And the same thing happened to me with 9/11. I was about 6 months away from finishing the book, and that happened. And I thought, well, that has to be in the book because it's so huge. It's going to change everybody's life. So I sat down and looked at my timeline for this book and realized that I had a big 2-year hole where this would be. And so I just popped it right in and wrote a few chapters that deal with it. And on we go. And I thought, boy, that's a strange coincidence. And and having it in the book explains a lot of stuff that I had already written. So it's spooky. It's a spooky thing.
Yeah, I was talking with a guest yesterday about William Gibson's last 2 novels, The Peripheral and Agency, take place about 120 years in the future, I think. And there's time travel of sorts that takes place in it, but essentially the idea is in the main timeline, something called the jackpot occurred over. The idea was the climate change, pandemics, and everything else. It's not just an on-off switch. The way Gibson portrays it, it's multiple decades that this was happening. And the downshot is that, a huge chunk of the human population is gone by the time the people in the main timeline, 120 years in the future, are doing their thing. Basically, when they go back, projecting information back in time, they have to figure out how to tell people what happened and, what their world is going to face if they don't change and branch off into another timeline. But yeah, the harrowingness and the ongoingness of it is what makes it an interesting apocalypse, I guess, if you want to term it as such.
If I was popping a pandemic into the book when I started to write it 8 years ago, first of all,
would it have mirrored this?
No, it would never have occurred to me that so many people would be so ignorant.
Yeah. That was Scott Edelman's line. He wrote zombie fiction. He said, all those zombie stories I have wrote, nobody ever volunteers to go out and get bitten.
No, it's like, I wouldn't have posited a world where everybody aggressively goes out without a face mask or goes around with guns to state capitals and thinks that they won't get shot at by, the National Guard or whoever it is that defends state capitals. But the culture that this is happening to is not the one that I started writing about 8 years ago. It's things have come to a head so, I don't know, stupidly, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the forces of stupidity against the forces of good, you know? Like evil doesn't even seem to come into it. These people are just so damn dumb.
I will tell you that. In my lobbying job, we had this big issue early on with the industry I represent and how screwed they got by this big regulation. Other industry groups negotiated and screwed my guys who were never organized before. I organized them. And I go in thinking it's going to be confrontational, that there was deliberate malice and everybody had it in for my industrial sector. And once I get involved, I discover they had no idea we existed. This was just complete negligence and incompetence. Oh, evil wasn't a motivator. Now that I'm out there, I think they do have it in for me, but that's just because I'm a paranoid. But yeah, really in the moment itself, though.
I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't be implying that Trump and his ilk are not evil. I mean, they're evil in that terrible, banal way.
But the incompetence outweighs the evil, which is the only thing saving us from. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if their marching orders were destroy Western Civ, then they're doing just fine. So maybe they're really competent at that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, every time some new thing comes down the line, you know, I just look at them and I think, all right, how many people among you want this? Is this what you want? Is this how you like to have things be?
And it's what we've seen since the Reagan era of let's strangle off the government. You know, it's the worst thing in the world. It takes our tax money, et cetera. And then something like this happens and you discover, oh yeah, the private free market is not going to solve, you know, a pandemic that could wipe out a massive chunk of the population. You actually need not just government, but a competent one that's funded for all the times that things aren't a disaster. But
well, I mean, if your customer base equals sick people, I suppose you might like as many sick people as possible.
Trust me, I represent a weird part of the pharma industry, and those guys are not, you know, doing cartwheels over this either. But yeah, it's good. Just it's just this really strange. Yeah. Anyway, that's the rant. We could go on for quite a while.
Sure, both of us. Yeah.
But you mentioned not being able to get out and go to the places you like. What sort of places? Where are you dying to go back to?
Well, I have always been deeply devoted to eating out.
Yeah.
And you can ask Eddie, I'm a pretty decent cook. I mean, I'm not, you know, a chef or anything, but I'm just tired of thinking about food and shopping and making, and you know, I really just want to go back to doing what I used to do, which was eating out about twice a day. Eddie doesn't like that.
That takes devotion. Yeah, that's a careerist determination there.
You know, I was single for a long time, and it's so nice if you're single to just wander over to your local happy place, which in my case is a sushi restaurant, and just have them make you something nice. And I cannot produce competent sushi out of my own kitchen.
Well, see, that could be the quarantine skill that you built. I'm just kidding. That's
yeah.
A, really specific. B, very likely to have one or both of you wind up in the hospital. So yeah, that's
yeah, it's just this sense that the world is going to be quite different once we get to whatever the other side of this might be. I mean, so many small businesses are in peril. I mean, my inbox is full of GoFundMe, please, and friends I know who have hair salons, bookshops, restaurants are all really on the edge. And I just wonder if we're going to emerge into a world of empty storefronts, you know? Yeah. I mean, I've seen towns that were, you know, maybe one occupied storefront to 4 empty. And I wonder if that's where we're headed here.
Right. Yeah, that's the flip side. Eddie and I were talking about re-envisioning work, that people might realize that I don't have to look busy for 8 hours. We can change, the way we work going forward. But yeah, the other side of that is all of these places that do need, people staffing constantly and, customers coming and going. Yeah, that's all potentially at risk. Do you have a favorite bookstore out there that you're keeping your fingers crossed is going to be around after this?
I actually have quite a few of them. Chicago is very rich in indie bookshops. The Bookseller is a great favorite. There's a fairly new bookshop called Bookends and Beginnings, which is in Evanston, Illinois, and they are rather excellent. Women and Children First, of course. There's a tiny little one which is quite new in Evanston called Page One, which I worry about because she's barely been in business for a year, I think. So, all these wonderful smaller shops, I just worry, like if places like Powell's and the Strand are having difficulties, these littler shops, I really do wonder how they're going to do.
Besides, and I don't want to say slotting, but slotting the pandemic into the new book, do you find what we're going through in general is permeating some of your other edits? Do you find you're rewriting other parts of the book with the mentality or something about how we're living now?
Strangely, it's almost the reverse. I find that what we're going through now explains the tone that the book already had.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to claim to be psychic or anything because I most assuredly am not, but the book has a kind of it's like an elegy for a lot of things that I love, because I feel as though this meltdown was implicit in the way we were headed anyhow. The tendency toward relying on tech for so many things rather than in-person interaction. The way we know about things like climate change and we just don't deign to do anything about it is all very. It's already baked into the book, and it really did not require a lot of tweaking to make it feel right. Some people who read it for me before this all happened, I think, found it. I think they were wondering if I was depressed or something. But if you read enough about climate, man, you will start to be a little.
There's not a positive spin to throw on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a beautiful love story or two or three going on in your book, but if you feel like the world is on fire, it's kind of hard to write something uplifting,
Do you ever feel only because this has come up with a couple of recent guests, the need to posit a better world in fiction? Or even the desire?
Well, one of my characters is actually a very inspired artistic coder who makes her own world. Her world is a world of kind of infinite museums. She's kind of borrowing from all the museums of the world and making one vast interconnected museum virtually. And so she takes a stab at a better world.
It sounds like a better Audrey world in particular, but
of course. But in the book, the solution for individual characters is music. Several of the characters are musicians, and the premise of the book is that we can't necessarily individually solve the world's problems, but we can make it more beautiful. It's an argument in favor of art while everything else goes to hell. I mean, it's also an argument that we should do something about the going to hell, but I find that my efforts at things like recycling and reducing my meat intake, etc., are not going to single-handedly resolve
especially
the problem.
Now that the kittens are going to make up for that. So,
in terms of eating all the meat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
now, did you have any period of being unable to focus, read, etc. in the early days of this? Or were you pretty much able to keep your rhythm as far as, intake of culture, literature, art, music?
Yeah, I don't know what Eddie's reply to that was, but basically we kept doing what we had been doing quite obsessively, which is watching the news. Ever since Trump got
not Tiger
elected.
King. Well,
No.
That's...
Well, we've watched a lot of stuff, but not that. But yeah, we've been riveted to Rachel Maddow and David Pakman, and just kind of in a kind of state of continuous disbelief and outrage.
Do you ever get the I need to click off and decompress model or a mindset, or is it pretty much you're able to moderate how much outrage you're generating on a daily basis?
I think I'm kind of compartmentalizing. I mean, it helps to have kittens to take care of, because the kittens are like, we want thing right now. Hey, mama, we're climbing the drapes. How about it? So, you can stop thinking about, the ridiculousness of Republicans long enough to go detach the kitten from the drapes.
Which I guess is an antidote, or at least a good form of solace, I suppose.
Well, they're very cuddly. The kittens, not the Republicans.
I will tell you stories when we're off mic. I will fill you in on some more craziness that I encountered. Okay. But do you find you're in touch more with distant friends, old friends? Have you been either Zoom or just calling to kind of reestablish contact with people?
I have not been reaching out much because I am really, really trying to finish a book. Okay. But other people have reached out, and we've very happily been in touch with some people we haven't talked to in a while. We were talking to good friends of Eddie's from Brisbane on Zoom the other day. So far, Eddie's had 2 Zoom meetings, one with these friends and the other with the potential kittens who we later adopted. So, yeah.
Were you able to hold them in front of a camera? Did they handle that at all, or were they pretty much running around like maniacs even then?
Yeah, so the Zoom meeting, of course, was mainly with the kitten's foster mom, and she was holding them up, and one of the kittens vamoosed almost immediately, and the other one stuck around for about a minute. So yeah, I think kittens and Zoom are the antithesis of each other.
Yeah, unless you just do a wide angle lens, and I'm with you. Yeah, have you changed? Have you had to do meetings yourself, or are you pretty much, again, everything is just hunkering down and finishing the novel?
So I recently started a nonprofit organization.
Oh, geez. So,
just whipped one up. This has been going on since last September, but it's a very long story, which I can tell you about. I don't know how interested your listeners would be in this, but basically I'm trying to start a new center for book arts. And there's a beautiful house, a big mansion by the lake in Evanston where I grew up. And I used to teach there, and it used to be an art center. It belongs to the city of Evanston, and they don't know what to do with it. There's been a lot of arguing about what to do with it. And so they asked for proposals. And so my group, which is called Artists Book House, we have made a proposal for this beautiful house, which needs a lot of work. And just as we turned it in, which was on February 28th, the whole pandemic thing started to come down. And so my lovely board of directors, we meet by Zoom now. So once a month we have a Zoom board meeting, but everything about this whole project has gone dormant while everybody tries to sort out how to have a public meeting, how to figure out how to fundraise. All that stuff is now a little confusing.
Have you figured out your best Zoom angle yet, or is that something you just surrender on at the beginning, that this is what I look like on a little tiny webcam and I'm going to deal with it?
I find myself distracted by my own appearance when in a Zoom meeting. I probably should just not care or anything, but I tend to prioritize just being somewhere quiet. But
no, I don't use video. I just put up one of those avatar icons. I picked up in Japan when I was in Japan in February, right before all this really got heavy. It's a coffee vending machine called Boss Coffee, and it's just got this stark silhouetted guy with a pipe and just the words Boss Coffee circling his head. And I thought, I need to stop and take a picture of that, because somewhere that is going to become my avatar. And then the world ended, and I was able to put that everywhere as my Zoom world. So,
that's rather good. You know that the Billie Ireland has been putting out some good Zoom backgrounds, like Windsor McKay and stuff.
Oh, I'll have to look for those. That's
yeah.
Good,
so maybe you could put your guy in front of like a Little Nemo background or something.
Yeah. Because that was Eddie's question. Both of us basically look like the 1970s right now. The first thing he asked me was how my hair was, because he wanted to talk about his hair too.
We were a little worried that this was going to involve video. Yeah.
Oh no, that's, I always say, if any of us look good on screen, this is not the job we would be in. That's, it's a very rare person who can carry that off. So I will ask for a quote unquote proof of life picture, just some shot in the last, day or two you can send me to include with the episode, potentially one that includes the kittens, which, would help. But yeah, something that shows off Eddie's ridiculous mane would also be appreciated. So.
Yeah. Well, I was telling him this morning, I was like, you got to just like comb that as high as possible and use all the hairspray in the house, and it'll look amazing.
Yeah, I told him I look like a backup musician for the Eagles back in the 70s. Like, I've just got this giant poof thing going on right now. So the upshot is, I don't care. No one's going to see it unless I post pictures. It doesn't matter, which, eventually we're all going to be accountable for this, I guess. But for now, we gotta lean into the quarantine, I suppose.
Well, it does make you sort out, who are we doing this for?
Yeah.
I mean, who do we put on nicer clothes for? I mean, I've been wearing lipstick every day because it is something I like. I guess I'm doing it for myself, or maybe Eddie, or possibly the kittens. I don't know. But I just do not feel myself if I'm not wearing lipstick.
Have you found other essences or things that turned out to be inessential in your life? Have there been moments of, either way, like the lipstick turns out to be something that is essential to you and you being you. But have you found other things that, wow, it turns out I didn't need to worry about this stuff at all, that I'd spent all my time, not all my time, but some of the time worrying about?
Something that
pants are always a big thing. I'm just kidding.
I swear to you, Gil, I am wearing jeans. I
have not worn anything but shorts or sweatpants for 2 months.
Oh.
I don't go anywhere. All I do is sweats or my running shorts for when I go out running. I literally have not had occasion to put anything else on.
Right. Well, I suppose if your day job involves suits, that you would take all the casual clothes wearing you could get. I just kind of look the same, except for my hair is a bit stripy looking at the moment. But
I also wouldn't trust Eddie to cut it. But that's
well,
I'm just advising.
No. Well, he cuts my little sideburns, But what? Yeah, what's inessential? I mean,
the inessentials, the things that don't matter as much now.
Yeah, The thing that seems like a major plus is the quiet. We live in a neighborhood where we can hear the L, and there's a high school about a block away from us. And so in ordinary life, we have 2 traffic jams a day, one of which takes place at about 8 in the morning, and the other one is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And during those times, heaven help you if you need to go anywhere or come back from anywhere, because it takes 20 minutes just to get to the driveway. Oof. Right? So, I mean, and we're just a little residential neighborhood. We're not really built for this, but somebody thought it would be a terrific idea to turn what used to be a middle school into a high school. So screaming, swearing children and trains. And so now that school's not in session and the CTA seems to have calmed down, they seem to be running fewer trains maybe, and far less traffic. We're also near a highway. So all of a sudden quiet has descended, and it is glorious. And that I will miss when everything revs up again. I think in my lifetime, I read somewhere Chicago has about twice as many automobiles as it did back in the early 80s. It may be more than that by now, but to me, the city seems always jam-packed full of cars and people compared to what I remember from when I was in my teens and 20s. So the spaciousness is really quite good, and I find myself liking that. At the same time, it feels rather spooky because the cause is not nice. So sure. When it comes back to normal life, I'll be glad for everybody, but also I'm trying to enjoy this while I have it.
It sounds like a trade-off. You don't want to sound like you're a Malthusian Thanos or something who wants to wipe out half the population for the sake of Lebensraum. But, it's good, I think, to have that moment of pause. We just hope it doesn't stretch on too long.
No.
Anyway, Audrey, thanks for coming on. I do look forward to the book. I'm not going to ask you about the time frame for, because that's a good way for you to come all the way out to New Jersey and punch me, which, would be bad for everybody's health. But
well, it's funny how everybody's time frames have just flown right out the window. I don't know when anything's happening anymore. So
I don't know how I was doing this 6 days a week. I look back like, Gil, why were you doing a podcast every single day? That doesn't make sense. But the time got weird on all of us. So, but anyway, thanks for coming on. I hope within the next year or so we can, Chicago, New York, wherever, we could sit down again and have some Polish food at or is it Polish or German that we had that time in?
We were at but no, it's great to hear your voice, and I'm so glad that you're checking in with everybody. That's a nice thing, sort of find out how the community is doing.
And that was Audrey Niffenegger. Go check out her site, audreyniffenegger.com, which is AudreyNiffenegger.com to learn more about her books and stories, other writing, art she makes, her fun collaboration with her husband, tomorrow's guest, Eddie Campbell. They did a collection of comics together, a single collection of a bunch of graphic stories called Bizarre Romance. You should also read The Time Traveler's Wife if you never have. It's a really well-structured, interesting book. Well-structured in terms of the time travel stuff and keeping the reader in suspense, even though one of the lead characters has been flitting all around time and space. I enjoyed the heck out of it, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. Audrey is also on Twitter at AA Niffenegger, all one word. And you should also check out artistsbookhouse.org, the nonprofit she talked about during the episode. There'll be links to all of this stuff in the episode and show notes. I'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in with Audrey's husband, Eddie Campbell. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at Groth18, GROTH18 @gmail.com. You can find contact info at our sites, vmspod.com and chimeraobscura.com/VM. And you can find a link to the COVID-19 sessions at both sites with all of these daily episodes. You can also just subscribe to the Virtual Memory Show via iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher just by taking our RSS feed or just searching for Virtual Memory Show and heading on from there. You can find all that stuff at either of our sites. Now, in the before time, I always recorded these podcasts in person, and now I'm doing everything remotely because we're all under quarantine. To do that, I'm using Zencastr.com, which is a service that allows me to record each guest's or each person's audio channel remotely, so that way we get a cleaner audio feed at the end. This is all technical stuff I don't know if you care about too much, but anyway, if you want to check it out, it is Zencastr.com, which is Zencastr. So Zencastr with no final E. There's a free level for it as well as a pro level that I use, which is $20 a month. My Patreon supporters more than cover the cost of that and my web hosting for all the storage for the episodes. Especially because I'm not spending any money anymore on all those in-person shows I was talking about. And that really did pile up in terms of tolls, parking in New York when I did New York City ones, subway trips, coffee, etc. Plus all the time I was spending in transit, which I've talked about in some of these past ones, but really my wife is a saint for dealing with all of the my absenteeism. Anyway, what I am saying is if you have some money to spare, if you want to support people in need right now, I am not one of those people. My day job is paying me just fine. My Patreon supporters more than cover the expenses of the show, as well as the zine I'm going to be printing next week. So if you do want to support people, go find the Patreons, Kickstarters, Indiegogos, GoFundMes, tip jars, whatever, for the artists, writers, and other people in need that you can help. If you'd rather not help individuals because it gets weird, go find a charity, go find your local food bank, other places that'll help people in need. Now, I am Gil Roth. It is Thursday, May 28th, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memory Show podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.